literally 72 hours before the startup weekend, and I decided, you know what, I'll give it a shot. I'll pitch it that Friday night. It'll die. Maybe I'll meet some interesting people. Maybe I'll hook up with another business opportunity and see what happens. So my expectations were not very high. But my background kind of gave me an interesting perspective. So as I mentioned, I was an engineer. I was actually an engineer for the theme park industry. So I did work for Disney and Universal and Lego. For my first 10 years of the company, I traveled all around the world doing installations and had a great time. I left, went back to business school, came back, was recruited by a company in California, but decided to come back and work with my previous company as Chief Operating Officer. And what I was excited about was kind of determining the future of the company, getting exposed to engineering, but you know, as it went on, I really was missing that engineering contact. I was longing for design reviews, which that's pretty sad. But that was my exposure to engineering at that point. And so when I came in here, I said, I want to get more in touch with that. But I also said, you know what, I look on the news and I like to yell at the news. Does anybody else like this? You look at the news and you go, why can't we do something about everything in Syria? Why can't we do something about this, that? And there's not really a whole lot you feel like you can do. One of the things I like to yell at the TV about was the U.S. losing its lead in science, technology, engineering, and math education. And I would yell, and I said, why isn't somebody doing something about that? And then I looked inside, and I looked at my kids, and I said, you know what? This is actually something I can do. And I took a step back and looked at the problem, and I kind of brought my theme park background into it. And I looked at it, and I said, theme parks are so great at storytelling. This is my daughter, Sophia, and she's been exposed to princesses. I came back from exercising this morning, and she was watching Frozen for like 5,000th time. And the fact of the matter is that princesses and Disney stories are so well formed, but the fact is there's nothing like that for science, technology education. You know, I hate when people do things like when I was a kid. Well, when I was a kid, all of our science education was centered around the space program, specifically manned space flight. And all the enthusiasm and everything in the curriculum in schools was about sending people to space, putting people on the moon. I'm not quite that old, but putting people on the moon, building the space shuttle program. And I grew up in Miami, so I could see the space shuttle launching. And it was really, I was so excited. I always wanted to be an aerospace engineer until I didn't, and then I wanted to be a theme park engineer. But nothing like that exists now. With the absence and that void from the space program, there's nothing that fills that void. So I've tried to fill the void on my own. I brought my daughter to Kennedy Space Center, and she takes it a little bit. I think she likes flipping the switches, which is great. That's a good start. That's how I got started. But that in itself is not enough. So when I came to Startup Weekend, I said there's got to be some way to fill this void, to have storytelling in this way. And so that's where I came up with Trobo. Now, the idea that I pitched on that Friday night pivoted over the course of the weekend, as I'm sure many of your ideas will as well. But what we came up with was this void. How do we identify the void? So the void is, where are the compelling and substantive toys for young children? Where do they exist? And the other thing, anybody have kids out there? You'll relate to the second one. Do toys really have to be so annoying? we have a toy that's somewhere in my garage. I don't know where it is. It's like the simplest thing in the world. It's a puzzle with photo sensors built into it. And when a puzzle piece is removed, it plays an animal sound. Well, a puzzle piece has been removed. It's somewhere in my garage, and in pitch black, when I'm trying to unload my car, all of a sudden I'll hear, ooh. But if you have kids, you'll relate to this idea of kids love to play toys, and if they're really repetitive and really annoying, it just gets in your face. So that was kind of a secondary void that we identified, but if I can do anything to help that cause with our product, then that's our goal. So we came up with Trobo. So Trobo is an interactive plush toy, companion for the child. Along with, it's a connected toy, it's also got a storyteller application that runs on the tablet. And the idea is to create exciting and engaging interactive stories on the tablet that interact with the actual physical, tangible toy, get kids excited. And all the stories take place in the world of science, technology, and engineering. So, for example, Trobo goes to Venus, how does he get home? The toy will actually talk and be the storyteller, but when it's not being the storyteller, it'll be kind of a mascot and a companion for the child. So that was really our goal, and that's when we finished up on Startup Weekend. That's really what we ended up with, and we ended up finishing second place, and we got a nice shiny medal, and it was awesome. But then it was, you know, what do we do now? So my business partner Chris, who unfortunately couldn't be here today, we had a talk. Chris has a full-time job, and he also has a child. And what was interesting about the Startup Weekend was we worked together in our previous jobs, but we'd gone our separate ways. He had left earlier than I did to go to business school. We hadn't really seen much of each other, and then we just ran into each other at startup weekend. And he pitched his idea on Friday. It was not chosen. He decided to join my team, and he really helped kind of take it along. So then, Sunday evening comes around. We're done with our presentation. We've won our shiny medal. What happens after that? And so we, took a breather, sat down, and decided, this is important to both of us. We both had that in common. And so how do we take it from there? And so we've continued with it. We've decided to keep going with what's kind of funny about this is during the weekend, at the end of the weekend, our ed says, all right, somebody, we hope somebody's going to be so passionate about their idea, they're going to quit their job and go after this. Well, I quit my job. I decided actually not to go back. And I'm still shocked to this day, but I still feel it was the right decision because I could devote my attention, my attention to something I feel passionate about, and that is Trobo. And so, where are we right now? We're still validating. We are in the process of building a prototype of the application. We're building a prototype of the toy. And we've got some focus groups set up with some local preschools, the Orlando Science Center. We're trying to get some feedback, we're trying to get some buy-in from it. We're looking for money at some point. I don't know what form that's going to be. I always have good conversations, but I did, for the most part, go all in. So that's where we are. Now, for you guys, where you are on Saturday afternoon, I thought it would be good to provide some words of wisdom. Some probably not sanctioned, but I will tell you what would have helped me at this point in my weekend. So the first part is for your presentation. Figure out your story. Obviously, storytelling is very important to us in our project, but in terms of your presentation and how you present your product, figure out your story and find the stories that support your story. When you're out there, I'm not saying plant your stories, but when you're out there, talk to people and look for the ideas that are going to support your story. If you're finding time and time again things that aren't supporting your story, then maybe you need to pivot. Maybe you need to look someplace else and figure out what your story really is. But when it comes to presenting tomorrow evening, that's what's going to do it for you, is having a tight story. I don't necessarily mean well-rehearsed, but a tight story that tells why you're doing what you're doing, why it's important, and why it's sustainable. Don't let the mentors get you down, they mean well. This is I can say this as a mentor, but I can also say this as just, I got so frustrated over startup weekend. I literally thought, Ron and I have talked about this subsequently, I literally thought the mentors would go into, like, come out of a room and go by chance. I told them to do X, you go in there and tell them to do Y. I literally thought it was a conspiracy, but then I've actually heard that there is a term for this. We met with several accelerators and actually heard there's a term called mentor whiplash, which is actually a real thing. The mentors mean well, but you have to realize everybody comes from a different perspective. They're trying to help you out. They're trying to point you in the right direction based on their experience. And a lot of it is good advice. A lot of it is very applicable to you. Some of it may not be. It doesn't mean you have to drive yourself crazy. It doesn't mean you have to, pull your hair out. But, recognize, try to sift through what's important to you, what's not, and try and recognize that and take what's important. But don't go crazy over it, because it will actually continue all the way through to your pitch. And if you walk into that without the confidence of knowing, hey, I feel confident about what I'm doing, it'll rattle you and it won't be great. Know your judges. They're on the website, I think, right? Do your research, know who they are, know what's important to them. And this will tie into the last point, actually, but do your research, know who they are, because that's who you want to tailor your story to. But, here's the big but. Is your goal to win the weekend, or is it to build something bigger? When we started Friday evening and pitched our idea, we had so much enthusiasm. We actually were second place after that. And everybody kept coming up to me. Did you guys do the Post-it thing? Yeah. When we did the Post-it thing, I got tons of votes, and everybody was really, you guys have an awesome idea. But then when it came to assembling the team, we had a lot of trouble. And I kept thinking, I was like, everybody loved the idea. Why are we having so much trouble? We were the only product that weekend that had a hardware component to it. And actually, I said we pivoted. On that Friday evening, it was a much more sophisticated, much more involved hardware component that as we kind of went through the weekend, we said, not only will we not be able to do this over the weekend, which isn't important, but we would need to raise so much money in order to do this, it's not practical. So we'll look at this as kind of a phase 2. But that idea of a hardware component compared to everybody else who was doing something software-oriented, I think spooked a lot of people. And they said, you know what, I want to win this weekend. They're not going to have anything on Sunday. I'm going to find another team. And that rattled me because I said, you know what, if everybody really thought this was a good idea, what we wanted to do on Sunday, or what we wanted to present, should be somewhat irrelevant. If it's about the idea, and you want to be part of that team, and it's going to go on past Sunday, I want to party with those people. I want to be on their team. But I think it was about, I want to win. And so you need to ask yourselves in the room as you're moving through this, what is your goal? Is your goal to walk around with that shiny medal? It is a nice medal. Is there similar medals?
No medals this time.
No, there are no medals this time. Don't do it for the medal. If your goal is a medal, the door is right here. But if you want something more, if you want Monday morning to roll around and you to have something where you go, you know what? I'm part of something important. I'm part of something bigger. I'm part of something more importantly that I can build. Consider that. And consider the bigger picture. When we went into it, I wasn't concerned about winning. I really just wanted to validate my idea and say, did I have something? And that's what I went into it. So that's what you need to do. So after startup weekend, the goal should be to build a good team. You know, maybe it's people on your team, maybe it's not people on your team. Maybe some of the people that are on your team will not be on your team after the weekend. Maybe some people on other teams will be. The other part of it is use your network. That's one of the things, coming from somebody who worked for a company and went into kind of the Central Florida entrepreneurship community, that's one of the things that's actually been really impressive to me is, and I talk to people about this, whether if we were in Northern California, whether the same thing would exist, where you'd find the same level of support from people. People are willing to help. When you talk to people, they're willing to give you advice. They're willing to say, oh, you need to talk to so-and-so, I'll introduce the two of you. Whether it's legal support or financial support for money. Money's a little bit dicey, but any kind of support that you can find, you'll find here, and you'll find a community that's willing to help you. So meet people, network, use that community because it's important. Continue to validate and figure out what happens next. That's kind of an important one. So that is us. One thing, I think I skipped through a slide, but one thing that's important, and they kept telling us during the beginning, was validate, 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 and I think I had that and skipped through another slide, but I didn't really realize how important that was until after. We did it downtown. We sent some people to a farmer's market and got some great stories that really supported our idea and supported what we were trying to do. There's really no excuse for not getting out there and talking to people. The weather's still holding up, but there's an event going down on Park Avenue. There's Park Avenue in general. It's a great way to talk to people and vet your idea. And you can use the excuse, I'm part of Startup Weekend over at Rollins. And that is an introduction that will not work after Monday. But it's extremely valuable. We relied over the course of the weekend on some of that, but we put more of our emphasis on surveys. And in a short weekend like this, it's hard to get enough survey data to make it statistically significant and really point you one way or the other. And sometimes you may get survey data that overwhelmingly points you into another direction, and it's Sunday afternoon, and you're kind of bought into what you're trying to do. So surveys are great. Getting out and talking to people are better, because the kind of things that come up when you talk to people are really, really great and provide great support for what you're trying to do, or may point you in a different direction, so it's valuable. So we are Trobo. There's our website. Grateful if anybody has any questions or wants to give us any feedback. You can check us out, what we're trying to do. Thank you very much.